It seems no matter who we are, where we've been, or what we've done, we all have one simple thing in common. Everyone has a backstory.
Well, it's another story. Yeah. You looking for change? Hello? We want to see some change? Or do we want to be change? Everybody here needs to be the change, right? This is not a spectator sport. This planet requires participation by all of us.
Thank you, Robert Shield. I love that little tag. Hey, welcome to Backstory. I'm Cowboy Bob Banfield, and this is Backstory, which you are watching on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network with my host and engineer sitting in the corner acting the clown himself, the one, the only, the almighty, the guy hanging out on the side of the hill because he couldn't make it to the top, Odin. Say hello, Odin.
Hello, Odin.
Hello. Say something.
Something?
Okay. What I don't need is a smart aleck. There'll be plenty of them coming in later.
Oh, shook it.
Hey, so this is Backstory. Let me get my disclaimer out of the way. My name is Bob Anfield, and I am the host of this show. I am not the owner, nor am I the provocateur of this show, nor am I being compensated in any way, shape, form, or monetary system for my ideas, opinions, or attitudes. I give those freely. If you don't like them, you know where the off button is. All right. From that point forward, I did not come here to pick a fight, although I will not back away from one. I did come here to get you to think, to get you to ask the questions that even I don't know to ask yet. But we're going to find out together. Hi, Odin, how are you? Sorry I'm not so pretty. I tried, but you sucked me into another show, and this is as pretty gets.
Hold on, I'm playing with my hair.
Yeah. Make it all stand up straight like that cartoon character from the Bubblegum. I'm going to lose the hat.
Oh, okay. Well, don't worry, you got the nice hair anyway. It's nice and flowy, you know.
Yeah, I still have all of it, or some. It's starting to get thin.
Oh, well, that's okay.
So I was in another show before this, as you're well aware, because you were there too. And they were talking on a number of subjects, of which I had planned on talking about as well. But I do think I'm probably going to irritate some people in the process. I may even offend a few of you. I don't do it with the intention of offending. I do it with the intention of finding clarity. Now, we are where we are today, and how did we get here is the biggest question. But first and foremost, we can all sit around and try to figure out how we got here, or we can put our wonderful brains to work and figure out where we're going. And the nice part about where we're going is we have choice. Whereas we can't choose where we've already been. We made that choice a long time ago. Where we're going is a choice. I'll start the conversation with the global warming idea and the philosophy that we are somehow going into a global warming system, and it's somehow we are responsible as human beings for creating global warming. I don't agree on either point. I do believe that the planet is going through a transition. I've explained this in the past. It's about our position with the sun, how magnetics work, and how we get ricocheted back and forth from different positions. And history, or science in history, has tried to prove and done a fairly good job over the years of designating the fact that we don't run in a constant circle orbit. We go out into a whole elongated scenario. And that previously, in our history as a planet, we have experienced this same kind of global warming followed by a global freeze, which we call the Ice Age. See, everybody talks about the last Ice Age. Nobody talks about how we got into the last Ice Age, because there's very few people left around who remember what it was like before the Ice Age. And there's only a few that were still around after the Ice Age to pick up the ball and carry the story forward. Now, In a previous program, they were talking about people like Anu, the Anunnaki, etc., and the idea that there were something or someone, they would suggest aliens, who were behind humanity becoming humanity. And that may be true. Or it may be, as we have been taught in many cultures under many languages, the idea of a great creator we call God. Let me emphasize here, and this is where I'm going to make some people unhappy. I emphasize to you that God is nothing more than an acronym. Greater Obedient Dependence. It was brought to you by Abraham when he had to control a growing tribe. It was brought to you from Moses when he had to control 40,000 people who didn't like each other, standing on a plain, suddenly free of generations, and trust me, generations. Grandma, grandpa, great-grandma, great-grandpa were slaves. Not in the sense that we think of the slaves that picked cotton in Georgia in the 17, 1800s. These people were slaves by design. Literally, nature had created an environment which was almost unsustainable in certain regions of what then was known to be the planet Earth. They didn't understand the whole global concept. They only knew the land they traveled on. But it was becoming inhospitable. Great droughts, terrible storms, flooding. The plants wouldn't grow. The animals wouldn't produce. It just was bad. And there were these people over here on the other side of a river that seemed to be thriving. And they went to them and said, will you please give us help? We are starving. Our crops won't grow. We have no resource. Will you help us? And they said, sure, we'll be your neighbor. We'll help you. This was one generation. Many generations later, a different person in control had passed and a new person was in charge. And the new person in charge didn't remember the promise of help. Okay? That was a long time ago. And this younger individual doesn't remember that. He wasn't born yet. All he knows is that there's a whole bunch of people down here who are not from his tribe, who he seems to be feeding, clothing, sheltering. And he said, hey, I think if y'all want to hang around, I want something back for my generosity, as it seems to be unending. So I want you to labor for me. I will give you the food and I will give you the shelter and I will take care of you. I won't even make you adopt my religion or even adopt my language or my ways, but I do ask that you give me your labor on a daily basis in order to take some of the burden off my tribe. And thus, we had the population of what we call the Hebrews, there were many others, who were now under obligation to work without mercy or without concession for a ruler who provided everything they needed. Thus, they were governed, obedient, and dependent. And that was what it was all about. The Godheadism has been around a long time, but every time we look at the origin stories of God, we find a society in need of organization and control in order to continue to coexist and expand or evolve. But we get back to the Anunnaki, because if the Anunnaki were here, as is told in the stories, before the Great Flood, Noah's Great Flood. See, everything we know today begins with Noah. The Great Flood came, it wiped everything out. The only guy left was the one who had the dingy little boat and all the stuffed animals. So he now becomes the father of all humanity. Not Adam. Adam was the original father of all humanity, but now we have Noah, the new father of all humanity. And he is going to now teach us, as a growing tribe, how to live in continuity with one another. And over many, many, many generations, until that system fails and becomes slaves to the pharaohs, we then start a new story. And the new story begins with a man named Moses who went up on a mountain to get away from a crowd of people who wanted to strip him bone to bone and throw him in the river. So being the only educated guy among them, okay, because if you know the story of Moses, he was raised in the palace. He was given an education, the best education the world had to offer at the time. And so everybody looked to him to have answers to the problems, but he didn't always have all the answers. But he did know that he had 40,000 people gathered together, most of which who didn't like each other. This 5,000 don't like that 7,000. It's just the way it is. It was very tribal. Once they were out from under the thumb of the Pharaoh, they were now left to make their own choices. And in the process of doing that, everyone became selfish. They did not want to share equally. Now consider this real quick. You've worked really hard. You really took care of your stocks. You took very good care of your properties and your holdings, and you made them grow and flourish. Your neighbor, on the other hand, yeah, he was careless. He let his car go to crap. He never washed or waxed it. He didn't care if the kid threw milkshakes all over the back seat. He never washed it out. And now he's going to give me his car, and you want my Ferrari. Okay, it doesn't quite seem fair, does it? Why should I give you everything I have? He's going to give you everything he has. Then you are singularly going to decide to redistribute that to everybody by equal portion. Although the contribution wasn't equal. See, we keep running into this problem. We now have a lot of people who are talking about we need to tax the rich. This has been going on for 25, 30 years now. We need to tax the rich. The rich aren't paying their fair share. I don't know if they are or aren't. I do know there are a lot of loopholes in the tax laws. And if you have enough money, you can spend that money over here, call it charity or scientific research or whatever you want to call it, and thus reduce your tax liability. If you've got really smart tax people, they will figure out how you can pay zero tax to the federal government, which does not mean you didn't pay out tax. Right? You had to give, if you didn't want to pay that tax, then you had to give an equal portion now to that to somebody like United Way, so you could come back around and say, see, I donated that money, so I don't owe any more tax. And those, excuse me, those are the loopholes in the law. Okay, so if you don't like the law, change the law, but standing around complaining about the law is kind of dumb because the law is still the law. Okay, so doing the wrong thing because you protest the law is no different than being criminal. And that was in a previous conversation. We were talking about criminality. And I say, what is criminal? Because in the sense that someone goes against the grain or against the agenda that has been handed down and accepted by the group, then that person is criminal. They're working against the system, so they are a criminal. But what if the system's wrong? What if the system is biased, slanted? What if it's one man's opinion? The first on the table for everyone to consider, and I ask you to do this in your own way. Come to your own conclusions. Don't take mine. I'm uneducated. I'm a nobody. I'm a dirt clod cowboy. Okay? Truth is subjective. If you talk to a Catholic, they'll tell you the truth. If you talk to a Hindu, they'll tell you the truth. If you talk to an Egyptian, they'll tell you the truth. If you talk to a Presbyterian, they'll lie to you until you give them money, then they'll tell you the truth. They're Presbyterians, they can't help themselves. But the point is, everybody has a truth, and to them, it is true. It is absolutely, positively true. But what if I told you that in spite of your best efforts, you are nothing more than a student of dogma? The truth you hold, the truth you say you know, was given to you. It was not discovered. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the real difference in the whole story, the backstory, because it's who gave you that lesson and what was in it for them. Now, the title of today's show was Building an Ark. And I started in this discussion, and I wanted to get away from it with Robert. earlier because I didn't want to blow my story. I don't want to have to repeat myself, as it were. Noah built an ark because somebody, and we get different stories here, came to him and said, the Creator is not happy. The Creator is going to punish everybody for breaking all the rules and not being what he told them to be. Gave them real simple set of plans and said, just do this, be a steward. Okay? There's nothing on this planet that is not here for a specific reason. Everything feeds on everything else. The parasites live in order to create certain environmental activities that keep certain species in control, blah, 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 blah. Lady said, there's no such thing as a virus on this planet. I disagree. We are a virus. So therefore, you can't contend that they, the aliens, the Anunnakis, did bring virus here. It was called man. I just lost Odin. I broke him up. Okay, so man is a virus in its own sense. We live in a bacterial environment as a viral entity. Okay, now from that point forward, okay, somebody then told us what we were supposed to believe in, what was the truth. But from the very beginning, if you buy the Anunnaki story and all that happened in Mesopotamia, we're talking before Babylon, we're talking before probably the last ice age, which is probably what Noah's flood really was the ending of an ice age when the water, the thaw was so intense that it just melted the ice so fast that it caused deluges across the planet. Given that you accept that idealism, or you take that train with me, then as we get back to the caboose in that train, we have to remember that the Anunnaki didn't create humanity without an agenda. So in order to support the agenda, that creator gave us a set of rules to live by, a policy, a precedent of what life as a human being on this planet would be. Because if we kept on that narrative, we fed that agenda, which was what they wanted in the first place. Otherwise, why create man? From that point forward, you now have a falling out. One man has two sons. Those two sons are very different personality. One son goes this way, one son goes that way. And I'm not even going to get into the Adam and Eve argument and who was it that Cain bred with, because if there was only Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, how did the species continue? Okay, I don't even want to get into the character of Eve if we follow that train of thought. So at any rate, in the splitting of those personalities, we came up with new stories. Each of these stories was designed for the specific purpose of gaining controls, right? This guy over here, he wanted this to happen. He wanted to be in control. So he said unto you, the masses, these are the rules we will live by, and I will stand atop these rules, and I will be the judge. Well, the guy over here essentially said the same thing, only he said, in order to not be a copycat of my brother, I'm going to change the story and make it this way. So now in more modern times, I can give you some basic analogies, okay? We have Enoch. We have a man called Jesus of Nazareth, and we have a man called Muhammad. Each of these presented a philosophical theory as to the purpose of life itself and our responsibility as a human being on this planet living. They changed the stories just slightly, so in order to make theirs an original story and them the originator of the story, thereby the natural leader of it all. And that's where we start getting into the clique of today, 2020, continental United States, and what is going on. Because the great enlightening, the great enlightenment is man's natural evolution to come to an understanding and recognize why we exist, what our purpose and functions are, and what to expect at the other side of the game. Now, since childhood, I've been told that if you're good, you get to go to heaven. And I've heard 100 different definitions as to what heaven was. Everything from golden streets and pearly gates, okay, to the, I can't say the word, it goes back to the Greeks, the Ethereal fields, something of that nature. Daryl Odin could probably answer that question, but he's not present at this particular point in time. So Lord knows where he is. That's between him and his Lord. So at any rate, we were given the Eleusinian fields, the story of Hercules and all that, and going there and where he left his wife and children. You know, does any of this really tangibly exist? I have never met anyone, and I am pushing 67 years old, and I've traveled quite extensively, at least around this country, and I have never met anyone who's actually been to heaven and come back. And I sure never met anybody who had slides or Polaroids. So that being the case, it seems like it's a one-way trip. You leave your body in this reality on this physical plane, and you go into what is an ethereal plane, and nobody knows what's there because the ethereals can't come back unless they again maintain mortal form. And once you jump into mortal form, you can't remember those other things. You're too busy with what's going on in your brain, the senses, your sight, sound, smell, taste. All these experiences are overwhelming your brain's capacity. So you have to give something up in order to gain something, sacrifice in order to succeed. So we lose that, which is why nobody has any real solid memory or real solid evidence of what goes on the other plane. We only scarcely have a few people who exist in today's society who will actually stand and defend the idea with any logical explanation that there's more than one dimension, that there's actually another whole world going on around me all the time, but it's in a slightly different dimension beyond a veil of my perception, and therefore I can't tell that they're there. So mayhap the dinosaurs did exist, mayhaps the dinosaurs still exist, but they're in another plane of reality, not my plane of reality, therefore I can't see them anymore. Doesn't mean they're not still walking around doing their thing. So we run into a lot of questions, and it keeps coming back to the same thing. There's many stories out there. All of these stories are designed to make you believe that you will be better off being obedient, governed, and dependent. Don't try for yourself, depend on me. This goes back to Moses and all the 40,000 people putting everything they owned in a circle. And that became the unified bank of these people. And from that, a select few went into these items and goods and distributed them now back out as needed. So food, water, etc., as it was needed. These supplies were now shared. Nobody went without, nobody suffered, but nobody had more than anyone else. Well, except for the guys that were in charge controlling that central bank. They could have as much as they wanted, and no one would ever know the difference one way or another. So if Isaiah or whomever went in and got bread and came out and gave everybody a slice of bread, and then when everybody went off to eat their bread, he went back into the center and he had himself 2 slices of bread. Who's going to know? He knows. He knows that he's in charge. He knows that he controls the resources and supplies, and he knows that he can take as much of it as he wants. And there's really nothing anybody can do about it, primarily because they don't know, and secondly, because they can't prove it even if they suspect it. Because the only person who has an inventory of what's in the bank is the guy who's running the bank. This is the society we live in, ladies and gentlemen, and it is the worst thing that ever happened to humanity, in my account. The second was academia, but we'll touch on that at another time. Society, this idea of society. Remember, Og and Grog and Mog. Okay. Grog was married or mated to Mog. Grog was the male, Mog was the female. Og, Grog, and Mog. Now, Og plays a number of roles because Og can either be Grog's best friend and sidekick, or Og can be the child of Mog and Grog. You see, it doesn't really matter. But the point is, they were self-contained. They lived in a cave. They didn't worry about other people or other communities or other neighborhoods. They worried about themselves. Do we have shelter from the weather? Do we have food to fill our bellies? Do we have clean water to drink so that we don't become sick? Okay. And are we capable to multiply and populate the earth? That's all they cared about. They didn't care about all these other things. Those are all the elements of society. Society said that you have to worry about your neighbor. Now, one side of the philosophy or theology argument would say that you need to worry about your neighbor because he's your natural enemy. That in a pinch, your neighbor, without having, will come to you and take, if he thinks he can get away with it, what you have to supplement what he lacks. On the other hand, the other side of that coin, you have the theology or philosophy that my neighbor is my companion and I need to care for him in order to make sure that I am stronger in the future. For instance, the tree falls down on my house. Bad storm. My roof's caved in. This great, big, huge, massive tree is crashing through my kitchen. Okay. I can't move this by myself. I need help. I need more hands, more backs.
So we don't call Uncle Bob?
Yeah. So consequently, I need my neighbor.
Okay.
Right? I need my neighbor to be strong. I need my neighbor to be healthy so that I can get my neighbor to help me get this tree out of my house. So should I fear my neighbor or should I care about my neighbor? Or should I exercise a little both? Recognizing that my neighbor today is my friend, tomorrow might be my adversary. And that I should never forget or underestimate where my neighbor is and what my neighbor's capable of. Now, for instance, is I got a couple of 30-year-olds living next door with a bunch of little rugrats that run around the house. Believe me when I tell you that the guy next door, who's almost a foot taller than me and a whole lot heavier, probably does not see me as something he fears. But in a pinch, he may see me as someone who can help, assist, aid, cooperate. So we have to take each situation on its own merit. Did you ask me if I was ready to take a phone call? Was that what you were saying?
No, I asked, did you? So should we call Uncle Bob to help us? Because I mean, to move this thing out of the out of the kitchen, I mean, it's a whole branch.
Absolutely.
You know, that sucker's at least 3,000
Uncle Bob
pounds.
is no help, but I will loan you a come-along. I have one out in the garage. See, I'm old. I have all the tools. I just don't use them anymore. You know.
Okay.
But you see, I think that's the problem where we get to. So we get back to this idea of building an ark. So now let's think about this. So somebody came to Noah and said, the Creator's pissed. He's going to wipe everything out, but he doesn't, two things. Okay. One, the Creator does not want to accept the failure. So if the Creator made man and man turned out to be worse than the monkey, okay, bad behavior, disrespectful, didn't, right, selfish, petty, greedy, okay, then that was not what man was supposed to become. But rather than wipe out the whole concept, let's see if we can't alter the batch a little bit. Maybe we can take the core and still work it in a different direction. Maybe I, as Creator, was negligent. Maybe I should have spent a little bit more time being part of your Cub Scout pack when you were a kid so that you would grow up with a little bit different approach to life than the one you did, because I was ignoring you while I was off making money.
Okay, but that ignores the fact of all-knowing, all-seeing, and all Creator.
But what if you are that Creator? Okay, I'll go back to something that Robert said earlier on the other show. That you have this creator, this supposedly all-seeing. Now remember, this is dogma. You have been told this. Have you ever met God one-on-one? Have you ever had a conversation across the table at a Denny's coffee shop with God? Most people would say, no, I have not. Some people would say, I don't know, I think maybe I have, but it wasn't like God was there. It was just like I heard this voice in my head, which is to say that maybe God exists, maybe God doesn't in that sense.
Or I hear voices.
But the Almighty, all-seeing, the previous conversation led to the point of we have this sense of free choice. Okay? And God in the Bible, depending on which book you read, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, whatever, okay, the writings of Krishna,
or which story you read,
come to this idea that the great creator created man in his own image.
It says in our.
Now, that's really interesting language if you take it apart at the seams. Take each of the words independently and value them for what they mean to you. Okay, but I would give you that if I took Shakespearean and I explained something to you in the Shakespearean style of language, you could walk away with a complete confusion. But when I told you the same story in textbook English from 3rd grade, it would make sense to you. Because thou hath not thee that is done, which might be, but ever for could not have been, as the sun did falleth from the sky, but the moon wept in sorrow. See, what does that mean? Okay, so if we take the word image and say the Creator created man in his own image. We talked already about the Anunnaki and the fact that maybe they are more human-like than we would think. We like to call them reptilians and give them all these philosophical ideas that we want to fantasize about. But let's just say, for sake of argument, they aren't that different from us anatomically. So it wasn't about that the Creator made us in that image, visual image. It was, in other stories, the Creator is that who is but is not. That which has form, but is without form. That which is neither hind, nor is it stag, meaning it's neither female or male. It is here, but it is not here. It is all around, but it isn't in one place. Now, if this Creator created a steward to overlook and help the various animals on this planet to maintain the ecology and environment of this planet for many, many generations of future survival, then it would seem that where the wolf had a nature, and the horse had a nature, and the bird had a nature, and the doe had a nature, that if man was going to be a steward over all of them, he would have to be able to understand all of them. He would have to be able to see the world in his mind from the deer's perspective, and the bear's, and the wolf. You see, the deer wants to live forever, but the wolf wants to eat. And the wolf, who wants to live forever, sees the deer as his food. Where's your good and evil here? Okay? Somebody killed Bambi's mommy, and that was sad. And all the girls in the theater cried their eyes out over, he lost his mommy. How sad. Yes, he lost his mommy, but somebody else ate.
Was Bambi a boy or girl? I always wondered.
I think he was supposed to be a buck, because he was going to grow up to be the king of his father. Right? He was going to follow suit to be the head of the herd. And if you simply take it from that perspective, then he would have been male. Bambi would have been a buck.
A buck.
Rather than a doe. Okay. But that gets aside of the story. A nice way to break that up and make me forget my track.
I did it, didn't I?
It worked very well. That was very good.
You like the way I did that? Yes, I slid that in real smooth. I mean,
but
we
the
give him a pronoun?
Is that Bambi's mom was somebody else's food. Now, let's say bear.
No, Godzilla.
Okay, go to the cave and ask the bear cubs if they thought eating Bambi's mom was good or bad. See, to them, that was Daddy brought home food, and that was good. Bambi said, somebody killed my mommy, and that's bad. But those are human interpretations of a situation. Bambi's mom had to die. And Chucky Bear had to eat.
Hold on. Bambi's mom had to die.
It's part of the cycle of nature, right? None of us live forever. Okay? I'm 60-some years old. I've got a son who is in his 40s. I have grandchildren that are entering their teens. Okay? I have another grandchild who is just now, I think, coming on to being 2 years of age. I think next spring she's 2 years of age. Okay, so, this is my world, all right? Good and evil is what is best to keep them alive and healthy. But if you go down the street and ask that guy down the street, he's going to tell you what's good is what makes his family healthy. What's bad is what happens when it disrupts the situation.
There's a lot of bad.
Nature doesn't see it that way. Nature sees that certain things must stay in balance and certain cycles must be maintained. And so consequently, we, as I was telling the young lady earlier, take it personally. The bird flies in front of the car and gets cracked on the windshield and dies.
Poor birdie.
And we get home and we pull the dead bird out of the windshield washer tray there in front of the windshield, and it's all poor bird. But you see, the bird was a bird. And if none of the birds ever died, there'd be too many birds. And that would harm some other species on the planet who is either dependent or underdependent of the bird. So if there were too many birds, there wouldn't be any worms. And if there weren't any worms, then there wouldn't be anybody to dig the trenches underneath the roots that help water the plants, that make the fruit, that feed the people, okay, who love to watch the birds in the sky. But there must be balance. Too many of one is bad for someone else.
So what about
the same thing? My late wife's argument was everything in moderation. Now, she kind of grew up in an Amish Mennonite community,
right?
So as a foster kid, so she was indoctrinated with some pretty straight-laced thinking. But from her, it was in moderation. You can have as much as you want, but you're smart if you only take as much as you need, save some for later, for starters. Right. And when it comes to eating and diet and, okay, so you're only going to give me one candy bar a day? Man, you're evil. You are just flat evil. How dare you limit me to one candy bar a day?
Oh, my God.
But see, if I ate 20 candy bars a day, which I would if I wasn't controlled, I'd end up with a stomach ache or diabetes or who knows, might kill me.
Or you might not have any candy bars.
Overdose on the chocolate and just die from it. We don't know.
Or you won't have any.
Or I don't have any at all. There is no chocolate, right?
Right.
So, and there is the being grateful. You're giving me one bar of chocolate. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you tightwad. Why can't I have as much chocolate as I want? And you say, because I'm giving you one bar of chocolate, enjoy that today, and there'll be one bar of chocolate tomorrow. And by the way, keep in mind, the kid down the street, he ain't getting no chocolate.
Hold on, I got a better one.
He's not limited to one bar, he's getting none.
But I got a better one, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were really smart, you would save those bars of chocolate, and on a day you had a freedom, you can have all the chocolate you want. Because you've saved all your chocolate.
We moved out of a house, an apartment, into a standalone house.
Mm-hmm.
We had been like in a duplex. Now we're in a standalone house. My son has his own bedroom. more G.I. Joe toys than you could count.
Oh,
I think
God.
everything Hasbro ever made that had G.I. Joe on it. And we're living in this nice little house, and we have everything we want and everything we need. And this boy is not satisfied with what is. He's speculating constantly on what could be. Because he's looking at the neighbors down the street and going, but they've got a Nintendo.
Uh-oh. You're in trouble.
Well, you have an Atari. Yeah, but they've got a Nintendo.
But that's more expensive cartridges.
We had so much, and yet in the possession of what we had, we desired more.
Human greed.
Yeah.
Sets in
natural character. Now, where does this come from? This is man exercising the nature of a squirrel. You like to think yourself special? When you're behaving like a squirrel, you're more like a squirrel than you are like a bear. Okay, because you grab it and you want to stow it for later. So you say the chocolate bar. When we were living in this house, we had everything we needed. The kid had plenty of clothes, had, all the toys, television sets, everything. His mom would make him a sandwich, and he would eat part of the sandwich. Later, mom would go up to, make the bed or change his bed or do whatever. And she'd find a half-eaten sandwich stuck under the mattress. Because even at a small age, this kid was worried about running out of food. What if I get hungry and nobody's here, or I get hungry and they say, no, you can't have anything to eat because you'll spoil your dinner.
Or you sleep at night and you're hungry.
I have a stash under my mattress in my bedroom. I have half a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, it's stale.
Yeah.
Okay, but I can eat that half peanut butter jelly whenever I want because I'm the only one that knows that sandwich is there.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to have eaten that at lunchtime, but I didn't. I only ate half of it because I'm already prepping for a disaster that will probably never come, like running out of food. But you see, that is a natural behavior of the human species.
But psychiatrists will say
ancestrally, from going all the way back to Og and Mog and Grog, okay, we know that strawberries are available at this time of year for this long a period of time, and then they're gone. And there won't be any more strawberries until this time next year. We don't even know what a year is yet, but we do understand that they're only here for a little while and then they're gone and then they come back, but much later. So we enjoy those strawberries while they're here. And we gather up as many of them as we can and we stuff them into our bag or our pouch or whatever, and we take them back to our cave and we keep them for later, for as long as we can keep them edible. We do this with everything. Man would go out and kill an animal 25 times what he could consume in a single meal. But he would only take pieces off of that animal. And then he would eat that piece, and then tomorrow he would come back and take another piece off that same animal, because this was a big animal. He found ways to keep the animal from rotting. He'd bury it in the ground, he'd stick it in the river, he covered it with salt. He discovered as time went on ways to preserve that food.
Right.
But he always took more in the idea that he would have more later if he wanted more. Didn't need more.
Or a disaster would occur. A disaster may have happened.
Right, because one of the things we knew was that the herds moved.
Oh, hold on. Got a better one.
Did you see the dances with wolves?
Dancing with the Wolves was a good one.
The big issue was the buffalo had not come, and the people in the tribe were hungry. They were running out of food, and they were waiting for the buffalo to come. And the buffalo didn't come and didn't come and didn't come. But the white man, who was far removed from where the tribe was at, the buffalo came by where he was at, and he ran and said, hey, the buffalo are over here. And the tribe packed everything up and went after the buffalo, because the buffalo were only here for a short period of time, and you had to get your things now while it was here. You couldn't wait till later. Kind of like Christmas at the department stores, right? You go to Christmas, there are always such cool items that you can buy right around the holidays between Thanksgiving and Christmas. They're not on the shelves the rest of the year, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to grab them while they're there, right? So that, this is society, folks. This is the creation of this thing called society. And what supports society? Academia.
Knowledge of
the academics keep ensuring that we understand the rules of society and perpetuate that forward momentum, while at the same time they try to think of new ways to change society as it moves forward. Why? Because if I sit down at a blackjack table with a single deck of cards and 3 other people at the table, and the dealer starts dealing blackjack, goes through the deck, comes back out, shuffles the cards, does it again, keeps going through, after a while, I will figure out when the 21s are going to pop up in the deal. It's a matter of rational count. You count what you see on the table, bases what you know is in the deck, and define what's happening to the guy over here. It's like, where's the best place at the table to sit? Is it the first seat at the table to the left of the dealer, or is it at the last seat of the table, which is at the right of the dealer? Well, if you sit at the right, you get to watch what the other 3 people get dealt. You can see what the flow of the numbers in the cards are like. So you can anticipate when you're going to get 2 kings, right? Or the king and the ace, and have a natural 21. So you can anticipate that. So what do? They put 7 decks in the shoe, so it makes it really hard to count, okay? Because now you've got not just 4 kings, you've now got, 7 times 4 kings, right? So as you move forward with this, society does the same thing. Academia is always looking for little ways to change the rules of society in order to keep us dependent, obedient, and guided or governed. They will guide us to an obedient dependence. Today, if you go to your local grocery store and walk in and look on the shelves, the chances are that you are going to find that most of the things you're looking for aren't there. Not so long ago, it was that you could go down one aisle in the store where they kept the bathroom sanitary paper supplies, and there was literally no toilet paper.
True.
An entire aisle of empty shelves because there was no toilet paper. Now that sounds ridiculous. It was annoying. It frustrated people. Some people should be horsewhipped for having been so greedy that they bought 600 rolls in the first visit just to make sure they didn't run out of toilet paper. Okay? God forbid they might have to wash their butt with water or something, right? That would be inconvenient. Okay, but what it tells you is you're dependent. They will decide what's going to be on the shelf, where it's going to be on the shelf, how much is going to be available, and whether it's going to be there at all. So today, we hear a lot about transportation disruptions, supply interruptions, et cetera, as part of this pandemic outbreak, which caused all this upheaval in our society. But I suggest to you that it really isn't about that as much as it's about they are showing us now what people in Florida or Carolina or even Texas already understood, that when a hurricane comes in and wipes everything out, you're going to be without some things for a while.
And you just got to rebuild.
But the rest of us don't get that, see? We don't live there, so we don't know this personally. It's not acceptable in our life. But give me a pandemic, limit supplies, and I now become acceptant of the idea that it doesn't make me happy, but I accept that, well, there just isn't any of that today. I've gone to the store, there was no half gallons of milk. or I've gone to the store and there's this particular bread that I choose to buy isn't there.
Or there's
the
sugar.
Rye bread and the wheat bread and this, but not the bread I want.
Or
right?
no
It's
sugar.
not there for whatever reason.
Or no
Always
sugar.
was there before.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I've been there and there's no sugar. How in the world is there no sugar?
They're teaching you that you are dependent, that they can control the vertical and the horizontal. They decide what we get and when we get it. Because, and I reiterate again, we are or can be one of 3 basic options. There's 4 actually, but it becomes one of 3 because 2 and 3 are the same, just slightly different. So there is the shepherd, there are the sheep, and there is the sheepdog. The sheepdog split in 2. You have the wolf. So you have the wolf, which preys on the sheep. You have the sheepdog, which keeps the sheep contained and is supposed to chase off the wolf. And then you have the shepherd who rules over top of all of them. So if the shepherd wants the sheep to be in control, the shepherd doesn't let the sheep out to pasture. He feeds them in the pens. He now uses the sheepdog to keep the sheep in the pen. So any sheep that tries to escape, the sheepdog goes after him, bites at his butt, and runs him back into the pen where he belongs, thus keeping them contained, thus making them entirely dependent on food from the shepherd's hand. But when the shepherd no longer wants to fleece you for your wool, and I use the word fleece intentionally with all the pun intended, when he's done fleecing you for your wool, or other words, what you can produce and give to him at no expense or effort by him. See, the shepherd doesn't do the work. The sheep do the work.
Mm-hmm.
The sheep grow the wool. Now, it is up to the shepherd to come out and collect the wool, but that's his entire labor in this process. But when you're no longer subjective to being fleeced for your wool because you're old or your wool is no good, guess what? You're led off to slaughter and to become lamb chops. And you do it willingly because you are dependent on the shepherd, and the shepherd says, food is over here now, come this way. And you follow him going, okay, man, we're going to go over here and eat. And you walk in there and the door's closed behind you and people start slinging sledgehammers at your head. And you're now lamb chops. And you went there willingly because he made you dependent on that food. So when you got hungry the next time and he said, nope, food's over here, you said, oh, okay, and you went over there to get the food. Never thinking the game had changed. You figured he was still going to come in and fleece you for your wool later in the year. No. He's decided he doesn't need you anymore, and you're going to be lamb chops because he's already got a warm sweater. Now he's hungry. He wants lamb chops. Guess who's going to be the lamb chops? Now, is this the world that you want to live in? Is this the world that your mommy promised you when she was bouncing you on her knee, telling you how special you were and how you could grow up to be anything you dreamed of in this world? You know what? Mommy wasn't wrong. But you forgot that mommy's all powerful and society is not. So you let society tell you that mommy was wrong and you can be whatever society decides to let you be.
Instead of you taking the initiative to be what you want to be.
Okay. I would strongly suggest that if it wasn't for a great deal of personal drive and vision, okay, Odin would not have a PhD before his name. He'd probably be working in heavy equipment or construction somewhere.
Actually, I'll probably enjoy it more.
Might.
Because I do like
more
being
stable
outside.
income.
Hey, there are a lot of people in corporate America, if you remember during the Obama administration, that left corporate America to go to waste management. Mm-hmm. But people don't want to discuss that part of history because they think being an exec gives you privileges because you make a lot of money.
I was in executive corporate world for a while in my life.
And they stress you out.
One of the things that I understood, and one of the areas in my resume, in that, you're supposed to have a cover
Yeah.
letter. Well, in my day, it wasn't a cover letter. It was the opening paragraph of your resume. And so I put in the opening resume. It was, one of those things was, what is it that you're looking for in an employment opportunity? Okay. What do you want the spirit or atmosphere of the company to be? And I said, I don't want to be hired for a job as a manager if you're not going to let me manage. So if you want a facilitator to come in and work 50 hours a week, follow the company manual to the T, never deviate, never make a decision on their own, okay, based on the condition of their facility in their neighborhood, then hire that guy. You don't want me. If you want somebody to manage your business, then get the hell out of the way and let me manage. That's why you hired me, for my expertise in management. And I believe that. I believe that, but I come from a school where when I was young, we were at almost the same point we are now in a social circle thing. We were sort of coming off of. I was too young to participate. It was gone by the time I was old enough. There used to be a program called apprenticeship.
Yeah, I remember that myself.
And you went to a tradesman or you went to a specialist and you worked for this individual for a couple of years, maybe as much as 4 or 5 years.
Steam filters.
You got paid, but not much. I mean, it was a subsistence existence, okay? But you learned from the master how to do what the master did.
But isn't that
And
what
when you were capable of doing it equal to the ability of the master, then you started gaining the big rewards that came with it. You had a career.
But isn't
Now,
that
in the old days, that would have been a wheelwright learning how to make wheels, or a blacksmith learning how to
dentist
fold metal,
The
But
dentist.
you learned.
But the dentist
And
did
that was
too.
the cheap labor.
But they did that back in the day with the dental. Your assistant was the next one to fall in line with to be a dentist or a doctor.
Yeah, they picked it. They picked it up in the mid '60s, and they sort of changed it. See, they already were seeing the non-equality issue here. Okay, there were certain people who were geared to rise up and move forward, and then there was the masses who just weren't. Okay, it wasn't happening. What did Robert say? They're functionally illiterate.
You give them their job, they know what they're doing. You take them a
Okay,
little bit
large
outside, they
portion
don't know
of society
nothing.
was, not now, they were then functionally illiterate. So that being the case, then you have to understand that there were those that were qualified to go off to college and those that were not. And of course, there was a lot of racial stuff in there. And I don't want to get into that. That was then, and we can't go back and undo that. We can only move forward. But so their solution to the problem was, if you're a kid and you can hit the scores, okay, so your math test scores are such and such, your
Right.
science scores are such and such, then you're qualified. And this company, hospital, doctor's office will pay for you to enroll in school and get certified or get your degree or diploma in that particular field. But for paying for that education, for taking care of you during the 2 to 4 years of education that's going to be required for you to do this job, you now owe us 4 years. So you promise at the onset that we'll pay for your school, but when you're done completing the school, you now have to work for this organization for that equal period of time as a interest on the loan, if you will. And if you fail, by way, so you don't graduate from the program or you just can't cut the mustard there, you still have to work for this company because you're under contract.
Right.
Only now your job is going to be down in the mailroom, or you're going to be part of the janitorial team. Okay, you're not going to come in at the 5th floor with your degree from the university. You're going to come in here because this company paid for you to go to school, and if you failed out, that's not the company's fault. You still owe the company for that effort. And that was their philosophy. And that worked out fairly well. But then came around the 70s, and it started becoming, the high pitch was, but the boys are going to school and getting good jobs, but the girls aren't. Because the girls are taught that their role in life is to grow up, find a nice boy who will feed them, provide them a nice house, give them a shiny car, and make them mommies. Her job is to raise the children and take care of the man. And they said, hey, this bites. We don't like this. My old man was a knothead, and my brother is an idiot, and I'm not going to put up with that in some man and be beholding and obedient and dependent on an idiot. So I want an equal chance to go out and do it for myself. I don't need him. I will go establish myself. And they said, okay. So then they did the whole, well, now we've got to readjust. So the colleges became a point in case that in order they had to enroll so many females in every semester based on the population of the college. So if the college had 4,500 students, then this percentage had to be female. Had to be. In the beginning, it worked because they had to still be qualified equal to the male counterpart. But it wasn't long we got down the road and they said, you can't hold this party accountable for being equal to this party over here. You have to take each party on their own merit and capability. You still have to have these proportionate numbers of gender representation, but you can't hold one gender to be equal to another gender, which is funny because the people coming out of the other universities on the other side of the country were telling us at this very time that, as a matter of fact, in the aptitude testing capability, memory, and distribution aspects of life, females were highly evolved above males. So they could, when presented properly, were better mathematicians on the fly than most men. They were better at a lot of things that men were not. Okay? Men tend to dominate, women tend to conquer, and there's a difference. Okay? A woman will see a problem and she'll figure out a way around it or over it, through it, or under it. A man will just smash the hell out of it and say, see, I won.
Hulk smash.
That's the difference, okay? So, you have these elements in our society, and it keeps coming back to the same thing. It's all been dogmatized. I don't care where you grew up. I don't care who your parents were. I don't care what your background was. Very, very few people living today can honestly say that they were encouraged, supported, and nurtured to find out for themselves. Screw the plan, screw society, we don't need this junk. You go out and figure out what you want to do, who you want to be, and we'll support you wholeheartedly. Now, we did evolve into that towards the late 90s and into the 2000s a little bit, but we didn't start out there. That's not the way it was back in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. You found the niche that you were told that you fit into, and you crawled into that niche, and you hung on like a bear. And you hoped that through time you elevated up that niche to a better position. So instead of being the guy at the bottom of this climb, you were the guy at the top. Because you know what happens when the guy in the middle has the bowel disruption and can't hold it while he's halfway up the side of a mountain face. Okay, he lets it go. The guy down at the bottom is being rained upon, and it ain't fun. This is society, folks. Okay, and we're all expected to come into the game at entry level. My old man used to tell me, it's one of his favorite lines, and he never actually accused me of it, which is interesting, but he used to point it out about other people. They all want to start at the top. They all get up one day and say, I'm going to go to work, but I should be the chairman of the board.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't have to work in the mailroom. I should start out here. And it's like, no, you don't get to start out there. You got to start out down here. It's like going to the Star Wars movie, the newest release, right? The first people in get to stand at the front of the line. Everybody else has to go further back. And you're not allowed to take cuts. People get very upset with you if you try to take cuts in the line, right? They've been standing here for a day and a half waiting to get into this stupid movie, which I still don't understand what motivates them to do that, but then that's them. But you're expected to go stand at the back of the line and wait your turn. And that movie might show 3 or 4 times before you make it up to the door to even get in the theater. But you're expected to stand in line. You're expected to stand in line everywhere. They teach you that in kindergarten. You learn to stand in line to get your cookies and milk. If you don't stand in line, you don't get cookies and milk. It's real simple. It's just the way it is. But here's the difference. You've been told all this. You've been taught all this. You've seen all this. You know with your own mind, having viewed with your own eyes, that this stuff doesn't work. What the lady say on the news the other night, this is, you wouldn't try to do this with your household budget. Okay? You wouldn't try to put yourself $3.5 trillion in debt if you were running on a household budget, because that would be illogical. Because in a household budget, you need to coexist. So you would. And you would only spend as much as you had. You wouldn't spend more than you had. And I remember when we were in a time, which was probably 10 years before you were even born, Odin, okay, which was a long time ago. I mean, Odin's been around since dawn of time. So, but even before you were born, there was no this thing as common credit. It didn't exist.
What is common credit? I've been trying to figure that out.
Common credit, everybody gets a credit card. Everybody gets a debit card. It doesn't matter whether you're a $3.50 an hour laborer or if you're a $30 an hour executive. Everybody gets credit. Why? Because there is no profit. Great joke years ago. City of Flagstaff. I have friends in high places. And I'm meeting with people from the city council. We're talking about the future of the economic dynamics of Flagstaff and how we can get out of the slump we were in. Because of gas prices, tourism wasn't coming. Without tourism, there was no industry. There's nothing there but a tourist stop on the way to the Grand Canyon. And so they're like, how can we get tourism back? And so we've had several meetings in this time. And I said to the one guy, they kept coming up with these plans. Well, we've tried this and it didn't work. And I said, that's because you plan an activity and you put it on the far east end of town. And then you try to convince the people from the west end of town to come over here and spend their money. Then next week, you go over to the far west end of town and you do an event. You try to get the people from the east to come back over here and spend the money. The problem is, it's the same dollar going back and forth. So I had $1. I went to your event and spent $1. I gave it to you. Next week, you bring that $1 over to me and give it to me. There's no new dollars. Okay? That chicken is a chicken. You can't just go poof and make that 2 chickens. It's a chicken. It lays X number of eggs. So you need to find a way to expand what you're bringing in, because remember, we're greedy by nature. It's our character. So to bring it in, we have to figure out a new angle. And the new angle came from a man named Kinsey, the Keynesian economics, okay? And Kinsey said, if you give a man in a need that which he desires, but only under the promise that he will compensate you for that as time unfolds. This, ladies and gentlemen, is called interest. So I can loan you $25 at 5% interest. And I can tell you that because I know you're broke, that's why you needed to borrow the $25, that for the next 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 18, 175 months, just pay me the interest. Don't worry about the principal. At the end of a year, or 2 years, depending on the interest rate, okay, I will have gotten from you somewhere in the neighborhood of $60.
And the principal's
And you
still
still
there.
owe me 25. You see, I got this, so maybe, we'll make it real easy numbers. $20, 10% interest. That's $2. In 10 months, you have paid me $20.
Unless you forget to pay me the
In
$2.
20 months, you have paid me $40. And you still owe me the original 20. You haven't given me that back yet. You're only giving me that 10% every month. But I had plenty of money, and that 20 doesn't mean crap to me if you never pay me back the 20. Now, you know where I learned this lesson? Selling cars on a car dealership lot. And the idea that we weren't selling cars. Never were we sending cars. Oh, we had lots of different makes and models, and they were pretty, and we kept them shiny and everything. But we weren't selling cars. We were selling a loan on a car. Because the reality of it is, the average automobile, it's different today because of technology, but let's go back to before they put computers in the cars. Okay? The average car, material and labor, to get that car from raw material to sitting on a car lot for you to drive home, cost the manufacturer somewhere in the neighborhood of about $460 to $480 per automobile.
And they include tires.
And they were selling those cars for $4,000 and $5,000 new on the lot. Now, I was only making $1.80 an hour in those days. So for me to pay my rent, buy my groceries, blah, 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 and have money left over to go buy that car, I was going to be a long time coming up with $4,000 or $49.95 to buy a brand new Mustang in 1964. I didn't have the money. I couldn't earn it. But you could loan me that money, and I could pay you I could pay you $5 a month every month, and I could have that brand new car. And that's what they did. They created this credit thing. When I was a kid, my father did not have credit cards. There were credit cards out there, but he didn't believe in it. He was raised in that
Cash and carry,
where you don't borrow, right? You live on what you've got, and if you don't have enough, work harder. Go
cash
get a
and
second
carry
job, whatever it takes, right? But you don't borrow money because that's a trap. Borrowing money is a trap. But you got to remember that since I was talking about the set of time. So, you had the Anunnaki, you had Adam, you had Moses, you had Noah, then you had Moses, the great resets, the resets of our social systems. Okay, so the next great reset, which we can all point our finger at and see, comes from the idea of what they called the New Deal, the Great New Deal, under Truman. And that was to pull us out of the Great Depression and post-World War II and all of that good stuff. But see, that was the problem. You could come home after having fought a war on a foreign land. You can now come home, find a girl, marry her, have babies, and you can live in that same rattle shack place that your parents lived in. Or, I want more. I want something in return. So the idea was the little pink houses. The government would subsidize building all these little houses, and all these young people, these veterans especially, could apply for the financial assistance to be able to move their families into these little pink houses. And so it began. So now I need a refrigerator in my little pink house. That's no problem. You can go over here and buy a refrigerator on time. Now, if you had a job and you made enough money, the bank would extend you a line of credit up until up until I believe it was 86, 87. I had a line of credit with the bank. So at any given point in time, I could walk in, tell the bank I wanted to attach my line of credit. I could walk out the door and I could write a check for, say, $20,000. And the bank said, no problem. you have the earning potential to make that money back in short order. So because you've been a trusted member of the bank and we've seen your cash flow, we see what you do and how you make your money. We understand that you have the potential to pay this back, but you need this money right now. And so by all means, you can write a check for $20,000. Now, technically, given the checkbook I was carrying in my pocket that my wife allowed me to have, I probably could not have written a check for more than $200. But the bank would let me write one for 20 without blinking an eye. But they were getting 3.5% interest off that $20,000, and I was expected to pay it up. Now, the first real breakout credit system that we know today, or recognize still today, came in the form of American Express, Banco de Gold. Okay. And American Express, the deal was, we'll loan you the money, but you have to pay it back in a predetermined period of time. So originally it was, you could set the designation. So I could borrow the money for 12 months. Then it became, you could borrow the money for 90 days. Then it became, you can borrow the money for 30 days. So you could go out and use your American Express card, but whatever you charged on that card, they expected you to pay it off in full with interest at the end of 30 days, not 35 days, 30 days. And if you kept that up and you were honorable, then they let you keep their card. If you weren't, then they shut the card down and you no longer had credit. Well, then the other banks came into it. So now you have Bank of America and First National and all these guys. And so now they all started issuing external credit, which created what you know today as MasterCard, Bank America, Visa. Okay, you know, these credit systems. Okay, so now they're not even the banks anymore. Now they become part of a central credit system, and everybody can get a credit card. And just to get you ready for having a credit card, they issue you a debit card, which is not credit. A debit card is based on what you have in the bank today. And if you don't have enough in the bank today and you try to use the debit card will be denied. Whereas a credit card says, oh, we'll let you charge up to this many thousands of dollars and you can pay it off in payments at your leisure, provided you make the interest payment every month. So they set us up with credit, and credit just made us more obedient and more dependent, because now you're buying against your future. In order to have the things you want today, you have to extend the idea that you no longer own your own future. You now have to labor for that lender until you satisfy that lender's demand. Essentially, folks, that's bondage. It's slavery. And in the continental United States, under the Constitution of the United States, that's illegal. You cannot put a man in bondage service. You can hire a man for equal wage, and you can fire a man for not doing the job, but you are not allowed to force a man into bondage, meaning that you're going to pay him subsistence wages for his labor, and you're going to pocket the rest. That didn't set so well with people. So the next step in the game was the great, again, we go back to, there's the academia. Okay, so you go back to the academians and you say, okay, so we need to come up with a new strategy because we're not getting enough. And so the next strategy was then, okay, we'll put you into these private credit contracts, which so the guy doesn't own you, but he does own your future. So if you want to move into that nice house with your wife and kids today, okay, and I don't mean to be gender biased, but if you want to move your family into a nice house in a nice neighborhood today, if you have the income, you can go to the bank and you can borrow the money and you can buy that house and you can move into it at the end of the week. Except in order to stay in that house now, you have to maintain this job, you have to maintain this income, and you have to maintain these payments. That is dependence. That is you being obedient to go to work to get the money that you're now going to send to the lender so that you can keep your family in this house. And the system said, wait a minute, we want more. So they decided they were going to try to find a new way to do this. Okay. They said, how can we get more? So you make $10 an hour, and right now you're giving us $1.35 every hour. And we'd like to, we notice the people over in England over there, they're making $10 an hour and they're giving $8.50 to the government. We think we should be getting more of your paycheck too. So we're going to figure out new angles. We call it taxation, but there's other secret ways that they get into this. And basically what it amounts to is they want you to work 60 minutes in an hour. They want you to earn so many pennies per minute, and they want you to give all of that money to them. And they will make sure that you have a place to live, food to eat, appropriate clothing to wear for the weather, and you will be allowed to have a limited number of children based on your status and your contribution. Because you remember, see, everything is about what you contribute in order to receive what you get. That's dependence. Okay, slavery is the gear. It's never gone away. It's been around since the beginning of time. I go to work to build something so that this other guy can now sell it back to me at a profit. Something about that doesn't make
sound
sense.
right. It don't sound right, bro.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You know why? I go to school. I go to work all day. I sweat blood and tears. I barely make enough money to live on. I take what little bit of money I have and I go over to somebody else's business and I buy something there that I need, loaf of bread. The baker who bakes the loaf of bread makes X amount of dollars an hour, works so many hours a week, barely gets by, takes a little bit of money he has left over, and he comes over here and he pays me to change the oil in his car. Now, he could change his own oil. I could bake my own bread. But the system says, no, you spend all day just fixing cars. You spend all day just baking bread and donuts. I'll give you money for baking bread, and I'll give you money for fixing cars. So you can take your money and go over here and give it to this guy to get bread, and he can come over here and get this to get your oil change. But you don't need any more than the absolute necessity, so you should give the rest of what you earn to the government. And to keep you pacified, I will keep giving you more money. So I'll give you a higher wage. I'll go from $1.80 an hour minimum wage. I'll take it to $2.35. And then I'll go from $2.35 to $3.25. Then I'll go from $3.25 to $5.
And that loaf of bread?
And then I'll go from $5 to $7.50, and then I'll say $10, and then I'll say $15, which they're barking now, $15 an hour. Trust me, do the math. $15 an hour, 40 hours a week. How much do you make? Okay, 150 4 times. $300, $600 a week. The house I live in costs $1,200 a month. That's $300 a week. That's half my paycheck goes to the rent. Then there's the groceries. Then there's the kid who always needs new shoes because his feet keep growing.
Then there's your electric and water.
Clothing, other such things. Okay.
Electric and water.
I have to buy all this. Plus, I bought that refrigerator on time and I bought that microwave on time. And, the old lady just had to have that living room furniture. So we went over to Make a Deal Furniture Place and bought that on time. Okay. So I have those payments to make. All right. At the end of the week, I'm lucky if I have $50 out of that $600 paycheck.
For gas.
Yeah, for gas. In a car I can't drive because I can't pay the insurance, and I'm not allowed to drive without auto insurance, which gets us to another line of conversation. And that obedience level, okay, and why we are where we are today. But one side of the story at a time, because it gets people confused if you change up too much.
It's a huge
But
story.
there it is, folks. You see, you've been swindled into a system that benefits the guy at the top but never actually benefits you. Unless you can come up with a bright idea and convince the guys at the top that they should give you more, sharing your idea on how they could be more successful themselves. So invent a widget.
Or sponsorship.
Right? If you invent a widget or come up with a new system at work, you'll get a promotion as gratitude for having done that.
$1.
But trust me, the guys at the top will profit from it. And why are they profiting? See, that takes us all the way back to the Ark. There was only so many square feet on the Ark. There were so many mouths to feed. There was only so much storage space for food. Henceforth, we were taught by our own device that we needed to learn how to portion things out in order to last for an undetermined period of time. Because remember, it rained 40 days and 40 nights, but nobody told him how long it was going to be before he would see dry land again.
Did he know how to navigate?
No.
So you hold on.
No.
So,
he barely knew how to build the boat, remember?
Yeah.
He didn't know how to navigate. He knew nothing about this. That boat, the water came in, that boat floated up.
And
it went wherever the waves took it, and the people inside of it survived.
With the animals. But hold on.
And then he, as the man said, and then he crashed the boat. And somebody got all offended. Just the other day I was watching something, and the other people got all offended. He didn't crash the Ark.
Yeah,
well, sure he did. He wasn't driving it. So the Ark went wherever the Ark went, and when the Ark ran into a great big rock in the middle of the water, it stopped. And then amazingly, the water receded.
Land ho.
Okay, but that man didn't know how to, there was no rudder. There was no, there was no navigation.
No sails.
They were simply put themselves in an airtight box, closed the lid, and waited for the flood to quit bouncing them off of stuff. And when they started settling down and they were sailing nice and even, they took the top off and looked out and went, oh, I guess it ain't raining anymore.
Okay, Bob. It's not raining.
So we learned to be conservative. I would call it selfish. You see, we learned to be selfish. And we have political parties. So the political parties are, one is conservative, being they are selfish. Okay? And the others are liberals, meaning irresponsible. See, the other ones go into the donut shop, and all they see are oodles and oodles of trays of donuts. And they want to eat all the donuts now, and they want to bring all their friends, and everybody should have donuts. But then when the donuts all run out, they turn around and go, hey, somebody needs to make donuts. But they don't want to do it because they never learned how. They were too busy grabbing freebies to ever learn how to do anything for themselves. They're irresponsible. The other side, on the other hand, took a tray of donuts, had one donut, put the rest of them away in an airtight box, and they're not sharing them with anybody. They're greedy, selfish. They call them conservatives.
Sound like the story of Moses. Noah's Ark. Sounds like Noah's Ark. Got all the room in the world. It could have had everybody involved to come into the Ark, but you know something? I'm not going to give up my space, and I got to have food too, and I got a woman, and she might find some other man, and the wind, it might blow the different direction.
I got a son who's supposedly putting the moves on me while I'm sleeping. It was like, isn't that what they brought the sheep along for?
And I still got a question about the story of Noah's Ark. Where'd they get the damn kangaroos?
Go for it.
Where'd they get the damn kangaroos at?
They were in a pouch.
They were marsupials. They're not even indigenous to.
They were in a pouch.
They were in a pouch. Okay.
They were in a pouch.
Okay.
Kangaroos. They were in a pouch. That's. We had one of those when you were a kid. Now, maybe.
I remember it.
You were more like a teenager. Maybe a teenager. They had a toy that you could buy from Wampa or one of them, right?
Yeah.
That was. It actually turned itself into and stuffed itself into a pouch for easy carrying, and then you could reinvert the pouch and it would pop out, and you'd have this stuffed animal to play with thing that was probably about yay big, right?
Yeah, I remember those. They even started making T-shirts.
Shrunk up into a pouch.
Yeah, they even made jackets that way after a while. The little light jackets.
For storing it on the back of your bike or sticking it in your backpack or whatever. Yeah, where it all rolled up and tucked into itself and zip closed. You know, became very small. You know. Yeah. And I mean, this is this is what we do. But my point here was, so Noah had to build that ark. He had to go get a lot of materials. He had forewarning. So he knew the flood was coming.
Right.
He knew he had an X period of time, which we don't really get a clear definition there as to when did the angels come and tell Noah that he needed to build the ark. And how long did it take Noah to accept that what he was hearing was real?
And how did he cut them trees?
Where did he get the materials, right? So, the materials he had to go out and get them.
And how'd you bring them back?
There was no lumber yard, so he had to go out and find the trees. He had to bring down the trees. He had to clean the trees. He had to bring the trees back. He didn't build the ark out of trees. He built the ark out of timbers, which means the trees had to be cut down and processed to become timbers. Okay, so there's all this time and labor that's involved in it.
And drying time.
And we won't talk about money because we don't know what the real financial situation of that day was. So we don't know I'm sure he had to barter. If nothing else, he had to give goods to get goods. So he needed nails to hold those boards together. He had to get those nails someplace. He either had to forge them himself, which would have been a lot of nails. Mm-hmm. Or he went and bought those nails from somebody else, a blacksmith who made nails. Yeah. So he had to barter something, exchange to get those nails. Nobody was reimbursing him for the expense, but then the expense was not an issue because the whole world was going to flood and money wouldn't have been any good anyway. So it's not like he had a mall on that ark that he could go play pinball at, or buy ice cream sandwiches or what have you. No movies to attend and buy tickets. So he didn't need money. Mm-hmm. So
what about fire?
He did all of that. Now he did all of that. He built the ark. Now he still had to go out and find all these animals. And somehow, I'm sorry, I just can't see this bearded old Jewish guy.
Oh, no, you didn't do it. Go ahead.
Standing at the side of a hill, this great big wooden thing that nobody knows what it is because nobody's ever seen anything like it before. And he's going, "Suey, suey, suey." And the animals are just all coming running to him. Strange wild animals from all over the planet are just coming running to his call.
Lions and
tigers.
Do you
think he had to go out and actually find these animals, capture these animals, and drag them, kicking and screaming, back to this thing he called an ark?
Don't forget.
So somewhere in between those 2 points is probably a reality.
Hold on. I'm just imagining him bringing the camel in.
Suey.
One hump or two.
Oh, cow, here, cow, oh, cow.
Yeah. One hump or two.
One hump or two. Well,
I'm sorry.
You know why they left the unicorn standing out in the rock in the rain? Because he wouldn't quit poking fun at everybody.
Oh, my God.
He didn't play well in tight crowds.
He didn't play well in tight crowds. Get away.
He just couldn't get over his point. He had to make it present all the time. So at any rate, so you have this great ordeal that he goes through to build the ark. Now, the rest of the story we know. The rains came, the floods came, the water rose, the boat floated. It lasted so long.
People died.
He let a bird out. The bird went out and found a branch, came back and said, "Hey, boss, there's dry land out there." And he said, "Hey, cool." And so that was the end of, so then we go into a whole dynamic of who knows what really happened because, again,
how'd you steer the boat?
Right. They didn't read, okay? They had very simple language, which is probably mostly gestures as it was words. lots of grunts and groans, but they didn't have a formal language. They didn't have a formal alphabet yet. That would all have to start all over again with Moses, okay, or with Noah and his family. They would have to, do that.
They
Now,
gotta have sex.
if the son ran off and found some other, we'll say Neanderthal for sake of argument, so that it keeps it from becoming really strange,
Okay.
and really upsetting to people. So we'll say that they were the only humans of their level at the time still in existence. After the Anunnaki had changed ancient man into the more modern man to be a good servant and slave, that his son went off and found one of those previous species before man had been enhanced, and that's where then he procreated, and we get the population of today.
Hold on, I got a question.
That's a long walk, by the way.
I'm trying to figure out, was she hanging on a rock?
Yeah, well, you see, that's what got me thrown out of kindergarten, because, at the age of 5, I was asking those kind of questions. Well, now, wait a minute. If the whole world was flooded and the only people that survived were on the ark, was she a mermaid? Go find your parent. You're grounded. Get out of here, I mean, because, if everything drowned, then the son left and went off to the land of Nod, where then the only other thing that could still be alive,
hold on,
outside of Noah's Ark, would have been a mermaid.
Okay, I got a question. The land
because there was no dry land, so it would have had to have been something that could live in the water. And it had to have at least been half human in order to be able to breed with Noah's son, to be able to create what would become the human race. See, there's the flaws in these stories that I bother.
The land of Nod.
Which is what brings me back to God. God was created by clever men and given to lesser clever men as the reason for everything. When God, in fact, may have been the Anunnaki, which means, although they are a superior race of beings, as we are led to believe, okay, they bleed. They cry when they're hurt. They bleed and they die. Therefore, who are they to tell me what I can and can't or shouldn't do? If they are no better than me in one sense, they bleed and they die. So there needed to be this creation of a being that was even greater than that. So great that you couldn't see it, so great that you couldn't hold it in your hand, so great that you could never touch it, so great because only a deity of that nature could possibly satisfy my intellectual mind to convince me to be subservient to that individual.
Jack Daniels.
Because I'll take my chances against any other man, be he bigger or smaller. Okay? When I was in the military, they taught us that you didn't need a gun. You just needed to be smarter than the guy who has one. Wait around a corner, and when he comes walking by, crack his skull open with a 2x4 and take his gun. Now you are armed.
Amen.
Never having given him a chance to even draw the gun. You are armed. Did you know that and it says, it always says, if you look closely, so you got to pay attention in life. If you look closely, see police cars and police vehicles moving around town all the time, parked in front of restaurants, donut shops, etc.
Grocery store.
There's a joke there. I didn't go there. I just made reference. Okay, so, but you notice there'll always be those ones that say supervisor along the bottom of the door or on the back, right? It says supervisor, so that everybody knows this is a boss cop. This isn't your average run-of-the-day beat cop. No. This is a boss cop. This guy has rank, he has privilege, and he has authority. He also has an entire National Guard armory in the back of his vehicle. Why do you think they started out with station wagons, then became Broncos, now they're the big SUVs, okay? Always the supervisors that drive those vehicles, because in the back of that vehicle are all the weapons of war you could possibly want, and enough to outfit at times upwards of as many as 6 to 10 other people. So
I deputize
it's not just that there's an M16 back there for him. Okay, he has the entire G.I. Joe weapons kit back there.
Say hello to my little friend.
Right. So, if you want or need that, it's right out there on the street waiting for you. You just got to be man enough to go get it. Okay. Now that's what the Army taught me. Okay. They, don't worry about it if you run out of ammunition. Just throw the damn gun away.
Mm-hmm.
Use it as a club.
Mm-hmm.
You can always get the other guy's gun. Never went into the field and fought the VC that we didn't pick up their weapons on the way out of the field.
That's right.
Generally because we had exhausted our ammunition for our weapons, and we would grab their AK-47s and their magazines off their dead, rotting bodies, and we were armed. Resupply. Take their food, you take their water. Same thing that the Indians did to the cavalry in the Old West, that the cavalry did to the Indians in the Old West. Okay? When our ammunition, we packed in so much and we run out, we take what the other guy brought. That's why we won, he lost, so it's ours now. So here we are. Noah has this ark. He had to go through all this planning. He had to go through all this effort and labor. Then he had to exist on the trip. And all of this was caused because of a great global change in climate. Okay, can all agree on that one page?
No, God pissed on us.
Noah, in order to avoid a dramatic change in global climate, build an ark in order to save his family. Okay, let's put that over here now and set it to cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's jump forward several thousands of years. Galileo, Copernicus, I'll do these in wrong order, Newton, the list goes on. Get up to modern day, get up to the telescope, you've got Powell, you've got guys like that.
Yeah.
And you have these people called the Mayan. And the Mayan have been tracking time for thousands of generations. 24,000 years, I believe, is the cycle. 24,000.
Well, they said that the Mayans' pyramids are older. The pyramids in Mexico are older than the pyramids in Egypt.
Yep.
So where's the civilization they talking about the beginnings? Because if they're older.
Well, see, if you go all the way back, and I'll try to do this as quick as possible because it really distracts from the timeline.
Okay, just keep the timeline.
But if you go all the way back, once upon a time there was one continent,
right?
One land mass. Then there was some kind of great upheaval. Maybe it was something that came in stellar, great asteroid, something like that hit it, but it caused that great one continent to break up into multiple continents.
Right.
Which we know today. And they moved. They did not stay all grouped together in one place. They moved about. And there were gaps. And where the gaps were created, the water flew in, and we call that the Indian, the Pacific, the Atlantic, etc. Right? Yeah. Oceans. All right? And the land masses spread apart. What's interesting is, on one side of the science argument, they're saying that actually we never stopped moving. And the rules of physics suggest that eventually all those continents are going to come back together and form one continent again.
But
that
opposite
which was
direction.
Sent out will be brought back.
Yeah.
Okay. So the fact that we're still in movement, the tectonic plates and all that stuff. So we're still in movement because we will keep moving in this direction till we run into something that stops us.
Or overlap it.
Are we moving to the east or are we moving to the west? I don't have an answer to that question. I just know that we are constantly moving. And the seas are constantly changing, both in depth and volume.
And in temperature.
Right? So the Pacific Ocean is actually getting bigger. And the Atlantic Ocean is actually getting smaller. But the only thing that can keep the Atlantic Ocean from getting too small is that, what do they call that trench?
Marinetta.
Yeah, okay. So there's this great rip in the planet, and it's full of water. And so can only get so close, and then there's going to be a pressurized vacuum that would keep the European continent and the American continent from making contact, because there would always be this buffer they couldn't get through. Kind of like, it's kind of like having a high pressure hose. If you keep the water flowing, you can't put your two fingers together through the water. It's too much force. So the Mariana Trench would create that kind of scenario. It also is what keeps our temperature where it is, because it's the undercurrent thermo exchange and
the exhaust vent. Just say exhaust vent. Just say exhaust vent.
I didn't learn the terminology. I only understood the but the concept is that it changed cold water to warm water, which creates the environment that we exist in today, or what we think we're existing in today. So now let's say that between Galileo and all of these people, modern day telescopes, the Mayans, who have this calendar that suddenly ends one day, just ends. After 24,000 years, it just ends.
Wow.
It was like, well, why didn't you go on to 25,000 years? And they said, well, because it ends. There's nothing at the other end to talk about, at least not to us. But then somebody else came to me and said, here's a thought. What if they were showing you one? So in the 24,000 years, the planet, which is going around the sun, constantly changing its orbit, doing this and doing that and going over here like this and back around like this. Okay. Every 24,000 years, it comes back to this place where it is too close for too long to the sun. And it fries the surface of the planet, thus evaporating all the water into the atmosphere, thus cutting off the sunlight now, making the planet dark. Then it starts to cool. Then the evaporated moisture in the atmosphere starts coming back down on the land, but there's no sunshine coming through, so the water comes down to the land and it freezes. And we have an ice age. Then the ice melts and the whole thing starts all over again, another 24,000 year cycle. Okay? Now, that is just a hypothetical, but it has a certain amount of rational logic to it. Okay? So you come back to and go, okay, so now let's go back to World War I. And really quickly, we look at World War I and what we learned about aerodynamics and eventually aerospace. Then we get into World War II. And then we now have created propulsion to the outer atmospheres. We can actually send up test objects and have them come back down and see what the test object is. For instance, we can put a dog in a capsule, launch it up in space, have it come back down and find a dog dead.
Even a monkey.
Go, okay, we need an airtight chamber because there's no oxygen up there. Dog died. So let's send some guinea pigs up and try that. Okay, well, they froze to death. Now we know that it's too cold and there's no oxygen. So slowly we learned about what was out there in upper space or outer space. But now we found this thing from these people called the Mayan. And we have some other stories from some other cultures that ring along the same line. And we start looking at this, and the mathematicians and the early computers, and they're calculating all this stuff. And somebody comes up and says, hey, man, you do realize that where we are at now in the fix of what's happening out there in space and our planet going around this sun, we're going to come into this time period where we're going to be really, really close to the sun for a very long period of time. And the planet and everything that's living on it that we understand, it's going to have a very hard time surviving that climate change. It's going to be very, very hot, very, very dry for a very long time. And it's going to be very hard for people or plants or animals to live on the surface. The radiation will kill them if the heat doesn't. Wow. It's a hell of an understanding. What are we going to do about that? I don't know. We're going to have to come up with a plan. Well, what are we going to go out and tell people now? We got to start, we got to start hoarding supplies because, if the sun starts getting so bad that the crops won't grow, we still need to eat. So what are we going to do about that? Well, let's start that seed bank up in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Right? or in the Arctic, okay, because it's up north. Antarctica is the south. So up in the Arctic, we'll start the seed bank. That way, we will have all of the core seeds to all of the plants we like, and we'll store them and freeze them. And when the time comes, we can bring them out and we can repopulate the planet with food sources
that we like.
And then somebody said, well, you know, there's a legend from these people called the Hopi out in Arizona, who are kind of related sort of loosely to those people called the Mayans that made that big calendar. And they have stories of their origin that says they came up from out of the depths of the earth through select cavern entrances where they had been living for 1,000 generations below the surface of the earth.
Underground bunkers.
They had pools of water, they had gardens of ground, they had everything they needed. They learned to grow their corn, they learned to make their maize, they learned to do all, but they stayed down underground because the temperature was 54 degrees, constant year round. Upstairs, out there on the surface, it was 20 below zero, and there was 40-foot deep ice everywhere. So they stayed down in these caverns under the ground until such time as the ice melted. Then they came up out of the caverns. So one day, one of the kids was playing around up there by that tunnel where he wasn't supposed to be, by the way, but he was breaking rules because he was a kid, and that's what kids do. And he came running back and he said, Grandpa, look, this bird just showed up carrying this branch. And Grandpa looked at the branch, looked at the bird, and said, gather the people, it's time to come out of the caves.
Let my people
came back up
go.
Onto the surface. And then, now, doesn't that sound an awful lot like Noah? And the bird and the branch and the whole sea, you know, it all comes together. And so they start a new population. So I contend that where we are at right now, folks, is that they know that the, quote, end is coming. They've known it for a century. They have been working diligently behind the scenes to create a way to ensure the survival of humanity. I can die, but Nancy Pelosi has to live forever. That's just the way selfish little girls from San Francisco are. Mommy told her she was special, and so therefore the whole world should recognize that she's special. And when we're all dead and perished, she should still be able to go on. And oh, by the way, she should have plenty of chocolate bars.
And ice cream out the freezer that she paid for with your money.
So see how I brought that around and wrapped that up real nice at the end there? Okay. So at any rate, I contend that the so-called conspiracy theories we've been hearing about disappearing personnel, about disappearing supplies, being large quantities of manufactured and tooled metals that never seem to go anywhere. Okay, they were made, we made them in factories at Republic Engineered Steel, but we don't know where they went. They didn't go to build aircraft carriers, they didn't go to build, where did they go?
Underground.
What did they do with these resources? Okay, why are women disappearing, supposedly taken up in the middle of the night, but they come back and, oh, by the way, all of their fertility has been removed from their anatomy, meaning basically they went in and took all the eggs. Gave you back the woman, but they took all the eggs. She can no longer have children. She has no eggs. What are they doing with the eggs? Why are 700 or 800 kids disappearing out of places like Upper Utah and Lower Wyoming? Why? Where are they going? Where are they disappearing to? Okay. Then you get to distractions. Every time we start asking questions about this or that, they come up with another Gabby Petrillo story to distract us with drama on the 6 o'clock news, so they don't have to talk about the other questions that are being asked that they don't want to answer. Because at the end of the day, you see, folks, you're either going to have to be inoculated against all the potential diseases of going from here to Mars or not. And by the way, we need to sort through the pile. So we need to know which ones of you are going to be infected and die anyway. So we'll find that out now through massive inoculations of the entire planet under the guise of something that, by the way, it appears they created in a laboratory and somehow managed to release it into the population, thus causing a pandemic, which has now killed some 634,000 people, which is an interesting number because 634,000 people, there are 340 million people on this continent. So if 600,000 out of 300 million, you're at this little small, minute 1/100th percentage of the population got sick and died from this virus. The rest of them didn't. And I will remind anybody out there who's being paranoid and scared and wants to take one side of the table or the other because it is dogma and propaganda and you're a sucker for listening to it or believing in it, but that's your problem. Everybody needs something to hold on to. I don't fault you for doing it. Just trying to clarify the facts. But the reality of it is that that little tiny percentage of people who got sick and died from this virus, okay, is a drop in the hat.
Was just the first wave.
The population of the planet. But if we have to build an ark, there's only so much room. Why are we driving so hard to get to Mars? Why did we quit Afghanistan? You want to know why we quit Afghanistan? Here's the real truth. And I don't have a glass ball or anything to look into. But here's how I see it. I am me, and I need a whole lot of money to feed a machine to keep people building my ark so that I can escape from this terrible thing that's coming that I can't stop because it's outside of my control. It's the universe doing it, right? The planet, the sun, the heat, the whole thing, global changing. Okay, but I need a lot of money to build it up, and I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing, so I need the money to come from places I don't have to explain where that money went.
Mm-hmm.
And for the last 20 years, we have been spending something like, I think it was $600,000 a day, maybe it was $600,000 a week in Afghanistan. If I bring all the troops home from Afghanistan, I don't have that bill anymore. I get to keep that money. It's already allocated. Congress has already approved the money, so it's already been taken out and put in a private bank. Only now I don't need to give that money over to Afghanistan. I can pull that money over here to pay for my ark, as I can with a lot of other things I'm doing. And I need to keep finding money. I need more money. See that $3.5 trillion? He says it's already paid for. Where'd the money come from? Okay, our whole national income as a nation doesn't reach that. So where did he get the $3.5 trillion that he wants to spend, which he claims is already paid for? Well, it is if you start cutting it out. See, I have more money to buy a brand new car if I fire 2 of the dishwashers and 1 of the busboys, and I own the restaurant. I'm still serving the same amount of meals. I'm still charging the same prices. I still have the same volume of business, but I'm not paying 2 dishwashers and a busboy anymore. So now the 1 dishwasher on each shift has to work twice as hard because he not only doesn't have somebody to help him wash dishes, he also has to go out and bus tables. But I just saved the salary off 3 people. Oh, so I can use that to buy my new boat. Is any of this starting to sound familiar to anybody out there? Because I really thought I was going to have some guests pop in here and argue, but they haven't shown up.
I guess they got kind of scared after you got
I
too
don't
deep.
doubt them. So at any rate, we're wrapping this show up. But I will be back, same time, same channel, on Thursday. So that's Backstory with Cowboy Bob on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday till Odin tells me different from 5 p.m., which wraps up the show, and I got 15 seconds. Hey, Odin,
Hit the
nice
music.
talking to you, brother. I will see you on Thursday, same time, same channel, and I look to an audience too. Let me know what our viewership was like later on this evening.
Give me
I
a
understand
second,
there was
brother.
57,000 people watching me last week, and we didn't even promote that I was going to be on the air.
Because it was the backstory.
I just have such a magnetic personality, they can't help themselves.
All right.
No ego here, folks. It's all fact.
Good night, everybody.
Mommy told me I was special.
Well, it's another story. Well, it's another story. Well, it's another story.
Backstory.
Another story. Well, it's another story.
We clear?